Well, excellent, good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Stephen Drew and I am chair of this committee. May I make a few housekeeping announcements? Those present, including any members of the public observing or any public speakers, are asked to note that this meeting is being filmed and live streamed. By your presence, you are deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for a webcast. May I please remind members that when speaking, they should not disclose any personal information on any individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach the Data Protection Act. Please make sure your microphones are switched off unless you're invited to speak. For those participating remotely, when you are invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone and camera are switched on, and then when you finish addressing the meeting, please turn your microphone off again. Please would members who are attending remotely indicate a wish to speak through a chat message in the Teams meeting. Those present in the chamber should indicate they wish to speak by raising their hand. I will ask the Vice Chair to note the order of speakers both virtually and in the room. Committee members present in the chamber, I will now invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Members, after I call your name, please introduce yourself and say which ward you represent. As I said earlier, my name is Councillor Stephen Drew and I am one of the members for Camborne. My Vice Chair is Councillor Graham Cone.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm one of the members for the Fenditton and Fulbourn ward.
Councillor Anna Bradnam is not with us as yet. Councillor Libby Earle. Thank you. Councillor Sue Ellington.
Hello, I'm Sue Ellington. I'm councillor for Swavesey. Councillor
Peter Fane.
Good evening, Peter Fane, Councillor for Shelford Ward.
And Councillor Hans-Raj is not here at the moment. Councillor Sally Ann Hart.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Sally Ann Hart and I'm one of the members for the Melbourne Ward.
Thank you. Councillor James Hobro.
Hello, I'm James Hobro, I'm the Councillor for Foxton Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Helen Leaming.
Hello, I'm Helen Leaming, I'm one of the members for Camborne Ward.
And Councillor John Lovelock.
Good afternoon, John Lovelock. I'm one of the councillors for Cottenham and Rampton.
And Councillor Richard Stobart.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Richard Stobart. I'm one of the members for Girton Ward.
And Councillor Dr. Aidan van der Weyer.
I'm Aidan van der Weyer. I represent the people of Barrington Ward.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members present, either in the chamber or online? I do not believe so. No. We also have with us several officers. Liz Watts, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Good evening, members. My name is Liz Watts. I'm the Chief Executive.
And Ian Senior.
That's me, Ian Senior. I'm Scrutiny and Advisor, Governance Advisor.
Thank you. And Aaron Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Democratic Services Technical Officer, here to make sure the stream of the meeting goes well.
And any officers present online, if you could introduce yourself, please. I suppose I ought to give you an order. That would be more sensible, wouldn't it? Rory, can you introduce yourself first, please?
Thank you, Chair. Rory McKenna, Monitoring Officer for the Council. Thanks.
Thank you. And Anne Ainsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Anne Ainsworth, Chief Operating Officer for the Council.
Malik, Head of Finance.
Thank you. And Jeff Membry.
Jeff Membry, Head of HR, Transformation and Corporate Services.
Thank you. I can confirm that the meeting is quorate, there being at least 4 committee members here in the chamber. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make that fact known to me so that it can be recorded in the minutes? For apologies, are there any apologies for absence?
Just the one from Councillor Martin Khan.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Anna Bradnam has contacted me to say that she is running slightly late due to traffic, but will be joining us as soon as possible. And declarations of interest. Do any members have interest to declare in relation to any item of business on this agenda? No. Thank you very much. If an interest subsequently becomes apparent later in the meeting, please raise it at that point. And then that brings us to the next item, which is minutes of last meeting. The minutes of last meeting have been published and have been seen by members. Is there anything within the minutes that any member of the committee would like to comment upon, suggest needs a change, or challenge in any way? I shall take the thundering silence as a complete acceptance of the minutes. Well done again, Ian, for an excellent set of minutes. Thank you very much. So therefore, as straight away, I will sign the minutes and we will accept those as a true record of the meeting. Thank you very much. Which brings us to item number 5, public questions. Daniel Fulton of the Fuse Lane Consortium is here to make a statement. Mr. Fulton, please make your statement now.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Parliament has enacted a number of laws requiring that local authorities publish their accounts on an annual basis, and that documents relating to those accounts, including public procurement contracts, are made available for public inspection in accordance with the timeframes established by the Secretary of State. For the last 2 financial years, this council has failed to meet those deadlines and has, in fact, failed to publish any accounts at all. Residents of multiple villages in South Cambridgeshire have requested access to the contract documents relating to one item of expenditure from the council's 2020-2021 accounts. This was a limited and focused request that could have been easily fulfilled by the council. Instead, the council refused the request. This refusal to allow public access to public information is part of a disturbing trend at this council that has become increasingly pervasive over the past 4 years. When potential wrongdoing becomes apparent, this council's response, all too often, is to hide the evidence at all costs, and despite any legal obligations the council may be under, to make the information available to councillors and members of the public. The local members for Long Stanton have declined to respond to residents' requests to view the contract documents in questions. Members of the opposition political group have remained silent as well. What reason could this council's chief executive, monitoring officer, Section 151 officer possibly have for keeping details of a public procurement contract secret after the contract has been fulfilled? And why won't a single member of this council support the documents being available for public inspection as is required by law? Do you all honestly believe that this council should not be accountable to the public directly for how it spends public funds? I would like to ask each member of this committee to please contact the leader of the council and ask her why she won't support transparency and openness in regards to public spending by this council. I will end on a positive note, and this is something I'm extremely happy about. Change at this council is possible. Look at what you've done to this committee in the past 4 months since the election. You have completely rejuvenated it and returned it to its original purpose under the legislation. That is a remarkable accomplishment. Previously, I would never have been able to be permitted to make these remarks today. I'm glad those days are over. Democracy cannot operate without freedom of political expression. The majority group at this council has shown that it is capable of renewal and self-improvement. And I would like to thank the chair and each and every member of this committee for having the opportunity to raise these issues today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fulton. I am going to read my answer to this question that I have prepared in advance. Thank you for your statement, Mr. Fulton. Like all residents of South Cambridgeshire, your participation in meetings of the council is welcome in supporting us to fulfil our responsibilities as councillors. I have allowed your statement using the discretion given to me as chair of the committee under the public speaking scheme, even though you did not follow the correct procedure in submitting the statement in time. As you are no doubt fully aware, the rules of the council are in place in order to ensure the most effective and efficient management of our work. Statements and questions are required to be submitted 3 working days in advance of the meeting taking place so that full and clear answers can be prepared to any pertinent points or questions that are raised. By not following procedures that are in place, you've made it more difficult for me as chair to fulfil what I am fully aware are my duties in this role. Therefore, whilst it would have been good to be able to provide a full response to the points you have raised, that is not possible on this occasion. This is disappointing for me as chair, as I wish to be fastidious in my delivery of my role as chair of the Scrutiny Overview Committee on behalf of all stakeholders in our district and beyond. Your question arrived yesterday, Monday the 5th of September, just after midday. I was first able to talk to Democratic Services about it around 4 p.m. when I'd finished my working day. In order to be fair and maximise my capacity to respond, I spent time last night and today talking to colleagues and officers so as to ascertain what information I could provide you with in response. I apologise that my answer is necessarily limited due to the very short period of time you gave me to do this. However, I will do my best in the circumstances and ask you to remember the short window of time I have had to do this. In relation to the delivery of the audits of 2019-2020 and 2020-21, as well as the specific request to view parts of the contract documents to which you refer, I am informed by the monitoring officer that you and he exchanged emails about this in August, and that an explanation was provided to you on the 23rd of August in relation to your specific questions that you have raised again in your statement today. I do not have anything additional to add to the response that you've been given by the monitoring officer, which in my view responds clearly and in full to your questions. I thank you for your kind words at the end of your statement and look forward to continuing to work constructively with you and all residents in South Cambridgeshire in my role as chair of this committee. I would like to remind you that in January 2022, the previous chair of this committee specifically reminded you via email of the requirement to submit statements or questions 3 clear working days ahead of the meeting as per the Council's public speaking scheme. Whilst I've used my discretion to allow your statement in order to be as open and transparent as possible, I'd like to remind you once again that the rules are in place to help you, as well as the Council's members and officers, to be best able to discharge their duties. Thank you. Right, that is the only public question or statement that we have. So therefore we move on to item 6, which relates to our future work plan. Now, normally at this point, obviously we would be going through items of information and scrutiny and overview related to things that we're going to Cabinet and other challenges, apologies, that's not the right word, and other activities that were taking place. As members are aware, clearly the agenda for today is a different one in that regard, because there are no items and reports related to things that are going to Cabinet to be reviewed and have questions about. Therefore, the meeting is likely to necessarily be shorter. However, I'm sure that we will spend sufficient time going through the things that we have. So the first thing that we are going to go through relates to the agreement we made at the last meeting that we would introduce a plan for members to be able to submit topics for the Scrutiny Overview Committee to work through. And that following discussion with officers and council leadership that we have put in place an idea that we will do that. And there have been 4 topics at this point which have been submitted in advance of the agenda for us to review. And what I intend for us to do is to go through each of these ones and just to have a relatively sort of short conversation in relation to how we might do each of these and what we would hope to get out of it as members of the committee and how we would then proceed once it has done. So the first one, which is on our list, relates to relationships between the planning service and parish and town councils. I should point out that all 4 of these were submitted by me. So therefore, I'm not going to then say, could somebody else please explain what it is? I'm going to transfer from the chair talking about it to me talking about it, because all 4 were submitted by me. So the first one submitted by Councillor Drew was relationships between planning service and parish and town councils. And my thinking behind that is that many members and many parish councils talk about the fact that they at times feel that their working relationship with the planning service is not as positive as they would like it to be. But we are also aware of the fact that our planning service works incredibly hard and does a huge amount of organisation and communication with our parish and town councils regarding how they are doing their activities. So therefore, we have what might be referred to as something of either a misunderstanding, something of a lack of connection in this, and it's my view that as a Scrutiny Overview Committee, this is something that's entirely appropriate for us to look into on behalf of our residents, our town and parish councils, and in a sense on behalf of our planning service, in what way we, by scrutinising it, can hope to improve that. I would also hope that we would find out about the good things that are happening and be able to identify examples where there are parish councils who have a much more positive view of their working relationship with the planning service, and also consider how the planning service views it. So my hope is that this would lead to us being able to assist both our officers and our parish town councils and residents to feel a positive working relationship, which can only be beneficial for what happens. So that is my thinking behind it. So what I'd like to do for each of these things is invite members of the committee to perhaps suggest ways in which they think we can pursue this item, what ways in which we think we could do this if we are to agree that this is something that as a Scrutiny Overview Committee we may well look into. And you're writing down names already. So my first one is Councillor Bradnam, and then I see Councillor Stobart's hand up. So Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'm wanting to inform our consideration with the work that was done previously by the Planning Service review, because we had a very thorough look at our planning service, and I'm sure the relationship with parish and town councils was considered as part of that review. So I think it'd be very helpful if we looked into what the outcomes and the discoveries and the findings of that review were to inform us as we go forward in thinking about how we might wish to proceed.
Okay, marvellous, thank you. And Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So in my limited time as councillor, I've seen the workings of a number of parish councils, and they were all radically different. And some seem to be on top of things, others quite stretched. And so their view of the planning service is a bit dependent upon their own experience, their own competence. And so just to give you one example, without naming names, a great enthusiasm to engage, but a lot of questions as to how to engage and how to set criteria for their own circumstances and what they want to achieve. You know, some have looked at, for example, neighbourhood plan and just balk at the whole notion of putting together a neighbourhood plan. They say, we're like 4 people. Look at us. They say, we're like 4 people. How can we take on something like that? And so in my discussions with colleagues in planning, they've made some very sensible suggestions as to how we can be flexible. And I think it's defining some of those notions of flexibility that we might make some success. So I would have thought a series of case studies dotted around the parish councils to identify things that are going right, things that aren't going so well, what's good practice, maybe even reach outside of South Cambs to other district councils to find out, you know, what's going well. Perhaps the local government association has some case studies that we can consider.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. It's well known, I think, that I'm also a member of a parish council, and would just like to feedback that I feel that we have a very positive relationship with the planning service. I'm just thinking in terms of getting the information and aware that our clerk seems to get very good responses when asked questions. So I'm wondering if we can, how we do involve, as Councillor Stobart said, how do we liaise with parish councils? I'm also aware that we had some feedback that only 19 parish councils responded to the parish survey that the planning team carried out a few months ago. I'm just wondering if that could be repeated, but I certainly feel that we need to get, as you said, some case studies so we can see where things are going well and then where we can sort of fill some of the gaps.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Ellington.
Thank you. I think some of the issues are around getting clear feedback as to why the objection or concerns or words that the parish councillors spent hours poring over are not taken into account when the planning decision is made. And I think one of the big concerns within my parish is that although planning consent is given, even though things that the parish council has objected in one way or another, that no enforcement is taken, or very little enforcement is taken for those who do not comply with the planning. And then the parish council certainly mine at times, has said, why do we bother? You know? And I think there is an element of lack of communication as to why enforcement wasn't taken and how that might be resolved.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Councillor Ellington. Councillor Fane and then Councillor Hobray.
Thank you, Chair. One of the areas of concern to parishes often relates to decisions as to whether individual applications are referred to committee or delegated to officers. And of course, we have a new scheme on that. My experience is that in practice, the fact that it is the Director of Planning or his delegate who's taking the decision rather than the Chair of Planning Committee makes very little difference. There is invariably consensus on it. However, there are a number of cases where parishes, often supported by members of the council, have asked for matters to be taken to committee which do not meet the criteria. And I think we need to take a look at the conflict that sometimes comes between members and parishes feeling very strongly that a matter should be taken to committee and the criteria for determining whether it is, which may dictate that that is more appropriately dealt with by officers. I don't suggest a solution, just an aspect I think we need to consider.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Hobray.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of comments, really. First of all, I mean, I'm a ward member for a ward that has 4 different parishes, so I've seen in a relatively short period of time, some different views on this. I would say that a couple of the parishes are very confident in understanding the system and how to respond to it. But a couple have previously found that they had a very good personal relationship with officers who've moved on and are feeling a little at sea. And my feeling is that occasional contact with the parishes from somebody knowledgeable, either an officer or the cabinet member, to help to rebuild those relationships and rebuild the confidence would be the key to solving some of those problems. So I think I second what Councillor Ellington has said, that it's all about the communication and about the parishes feeling comfortable in understanding the system as it is today, not as perhaps it was when they last really understood it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Councillor van der Weer.
Yeah, just coming out to this discussion, it's very clear that there's a large diversity in ways of approaches from parishes and experiences. And so if we're doing some scrutiny, doing some work on this, then we need to find some way of capturing that. I can't remember what you said, that I think Councillor Bradnam said that there was a survey done with not many responses. So possibly one of the things we could do, maybe parishes would respond better to a survey coming from us as members rather than a sort of official survey. So a way of approaching it might be to have a task force group that set up a survey of parishes and came back with a summary, but also as a representation of the diversity of those views, so we have a bit more of a sort of evidence based than the multiplicity of anecdotes that we have at the moment.
Indeed. Thank you. And Councillor Cone.
Yeah, I would agree with that, a survey that sort of people feel they want to engage in, essentially, because the last one not having a high participation, really. And the only other thing I was going to say is I think people find the sort of structures and the teams sometimes a little bit hard to follow, especially with staff changes sometimes. So I think it's sort of maybe having a point of contact at each parish council. That may be a chairman of that parish council, it may be a clerk of that parish council, but making sure that those changes are sort of communicated regularly so that they're always up to date on the point of contact.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Lovelock.
Hello. I am in the, I think, interesting position of having gone from being a parish councillor to be a district councillor. So I find myself suddenly seeing things very differently. And in particular, since I've become a district councillor, I have established some very good communication links directly with the planning offices, which I never had before. And that means I understand where they're coming from. They're very responsive to my requests for information. normally phone me back if I ask them to, and I can only be very impressed with that will to communicate. So I went to the parish clerk to ask, what's your view of the planning departments? Of course, she has the same one I had before, which is that they're very slow to respond, that they don't know who's enrolled anymore because of the retention issues which we are focusing on by other means. And it's such an important issue because change of officers, change of structures, or at least change of roles, change of individuals, makes it very hard for the parish to actually know who they should be talking to at a general level rather than on specifics. Just one point about that delegation versus non-delegation. And again, this is just a point from the parish recently. We wanted somebody to go to delegation, to committee, but it was decided by officers. And the problem we had was that the argument for why it was done by delegation was very complex, very legalistic, probably very correct, but very untransparent to the people at the other end. So all they see is, no, your neighbourhood plan doesn't say what you thought it said. You can't limit that. So I think there are, I'm just saying, I think there are communication issues, and I think we can improve them very much over what they are at the moment. Enforcement is, of course, another issue. Other people have commented on that as well. I won't say anymore. It is just a difficult issue. I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other councillors who wish to make any comment in relation to that? So, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it just came to mind now. I mean, I feel enthusiastic about the idea we're talking about compliance moving forward, and interesting to see how those discussions work out. One of the things that, as I say, just came to mind was I'm mindful that sometimes our planning committee will see that perhaps the parish has supported an application and then it's perhaps rejected, and then vice versa. So I'm wondering if there might be some analysis of those type of things we could look at, so we can actually get some idea of how big is this problem, in terms of there being a lack of perhaps agreement and perhaps greater understanding. And I did have a situation the other day where I was looking at the planning portal and trying to work my way through a planning application, and I've already fed back to the planning department that, say, some of the language there, it's just far too difficult to understand. And so if we're trying to empower individuals to do a household application, how perhaps we can look at that and make it more, easier to understand and to navigate your way through, so perhaps those levels of frustration don't build up. So I think there's a lot of stuff we could do here.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. I'd like to pause for a second because we've actually had one councillor and two officers join us in the meeting. So therefore, I assume it would be sensible to ask them to introduce themselves. Yes, excellent. Councillor Bradnam, would you just like, now that you've joined us, just like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam. I'm one of the three members for Milton and Waterbeach.
Thank you very much. And officers, we have Bodhi Asan who's joined us.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bodhi Asan. I'm the head of Climate Environment at the Shared Waste Service. Thank you.
And Peter Campbell.
And hello, I'm Peter Campbell, Head of Housing.
Thank you very much, all three of you. Okay, so I think that's all councillors wish to speak. I'm going to, at the end of each one, just turn to you, Liz, if there is anything that you want to add to the discussion, any thoughts with respect to them. I'm also quite happy to turn to the six officers who are there as well, if there's anything they wish to add before we move on to the next one, but I will come to you first.
Thank you, Councillor Drew. And Stephen Kelly's on holiday at the moment, or else he certainly would be here, and I'd be turning straight to him as it's his service. I think we'd welcome this scrutiny. As Councillor Bradnam mentioned, we did similar sort of scrutiny, it was probably a couple of years ago now, and I think it would be great to kind of go back to, what we learned from that, maybe take forward some of the ideas around, how do we get more responses from the surveys. I think the idea about members helping us with that would be brilliant because, you're kind of much closer to those communities and parishes. Case studies, again, I think, if we had some case studies, I think that would be great. So, broadly speaking, very supportive. We just obviously need to plan it into our own work programme as well as yours.
Great, thank you. And do any of the officers who are attending the meeting online have anything they would like to add to that point? I will take that as a chorus of 5 shaking heads on our big screens in the hall. Oh, Councillor Stobart and Councillor Bradnam's hands are up, so we'll do the two of you and then I'm going to move us on. Councillor Stobart, I think you were first, or at least I saw you first.
By a short head. Thank you. So we did implicitly talk about the role of members in relation to liaison with parish councils, but I wonder if we could be more explicit in raising that as a question, how can we help? How can we facilitate? How can we correct misconceptions and so on? So it'd be nice to think we had a role that could be developed. So I just wanted to add that to the kind of list of tasks.
Excellent, thank you. And Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out two different things. One which follows on from what Councillor Stobart said is some of us are, in my case, a member of the parish council, as well as, in my case, not only their district councillor, but their county councillor. Now, with that comes both some constraints, but also some benefits. And you can, I'm sure, appreciate that they vary according to which parish council you're attending. I am attending, should I say. And so what I think we need, what would be good if we could engender is the trust between the members of the parish council to understand that we're there to help. And of course, you'll appreciate I try to do that whenever I'm attending a parish council, and to help them understand where they've perhaps gone off on a bit of a misunderstanding route, is to try and help to explain where it might, the clarity of the situation. So that's one thing that we can do that as when we're just attending. But the trouble is that when we're attending as just a district councillor, or as in my case as a county councillor as well, we only have one slot to speak to the parish council, and that is as their district councillor. So we need to fit that into our district council reports in order to be able to speak to it. So some parish councils are more willing to listen outside the forum of their report. But for example, if you were sitting in a parish council and they were talking about planning, you wouldn't, and they might be objecting to why this application was not taken to committee. You as a district councillor can't speak on that, because that's not when you're entitled to speak as a district councillor. So it's quite a delicate art in that. So you might have to fit it into your district councillor slot. The second thing is that in the past, we've had some very useful training sessions for parish councils at which just this kind of case study is put out as a working example for a group of parish councils to work through together. And they learn and some of them are very experienced, some of them are very knowledgeable, but some of those people who might be new to planning can learn about the way in which their contributions to the planning process can be most productive. And those exercises are really useful. So, but I appreciate they're heavy on staff time, and at the moment I know staff time is not what we have an awful lot of. So I'm just wondering whether the district councillors could help in that regard, interpreting real examples of planning applications on behalf of the planning staff if they're too busy to do it themselves.
Great, thank you very much. So, thank you everyone for that. Whilst it's not something necessarily needs to go to a vote or whatever else, what I do intend to do at the end of each one is just kind of check that we have a general sense of assent, that everyone is happy that we pursue this as a potential item based on the conversation we've had. So what obviously would then happen is that Graham and I, with Ian in the first instance, would come up with exactly route to do this. We would then work with Liz and any other officers, as has been referred to, about how we do this, and then bring it back to committee and actually show how we're going to work through. So in the first instance, I just want to check that everyone is happy that the relationships between the planning service and parish and town councils is a topic that we will put onto our work programme for Scrutiny Overview. Do I have everyone's assent? Thank you very much. Okay, so the second one, refers to the plans for the efficient use of the space available at South Cambridgeshire District Council Hall up to 2026. And I was minded in relation to this because obviously we know that a good programme of works and investment on the quality of the facilities in the hall has been undergone for a period of time to ensure that as a public space for youth, both by councillors and officers and by the public, that this is the best possible facility we have. We also know that there has been both the impact of the COVID pandemic and then the long-term changes that we know that that is going to engender in the use of the hall. And we know that one of the things that has been talked about and has been presented to council and others is the way in which there is the plan for a greater increase in the use of the spaces here at South Cambs Hall for maybe business use or private use or public use or whichever terms that we use. And I just think that considering that this obviously represents the main space that the District Council has, and obviously there is investment involved in doing that, that it is something that we should be checking with officers that the use of the space in the hall is maximised and is being as effective as possible. I would see this as a much smaller topic, clearly, than the relationship between parish councils and the planning service. This isn't one where we're going off to a range of parish councils and having case studies and training, whatever. It's more of a kind of asking for report and investigation of information. And I just think it's important for us in terms of maximising the efficient use of the resources that we have, and something, again, that we potentially can be very proud of as a council, that we are using our spaces in the most effective way possible. So I just open that one up for any comments at this stage. And Councillor Ellington's hand has gone up, and obviously Councillor Cohn will keep his eyes peeled for more. Councillor Ellington, sorry.
I think there are two elements that immediately come to mind. One is security, but the second is probably more close to my heart, and that is that there is such an opportunity to use that space in a way in which we can promote the work of the council and promote and make the council much more central to the community of South Cambs. It seems to me that there are a number of charities, not that I'm thinking we're going to give them the space free, but we do work with a large number of charities, the CAB, Care Network, one or two come to mind immediately. There are also people like the police and some subsections of their work. There are all sorts of people who are involved in the community who at the moment perhaps see us as a separate identity somewhere that they might have to get some regulation or legal relationship with. But it is such an opportunity for us to be, for people to see what we do, but also for people to be engaged in what we do. And I have no particular idea in my head, but it just seems such an opportunity we shouldn't miss it.
Thank you, Councillor Ellington. Councillor Cohn.
So the questions that I would like to get from the report around this was kind of who we've maybe already approached, have we got anyone currently renting space off us, what is our capacity in terms of sort of office space, how many people can we have in the building safely and so forth. Because I think if we start to draw that out of the report that comes forward, then we can look at organisations like Sue has alluded to, that actually not only in terms of just gaining money into the council, but also organisations that might be a benefit to have in the building.
Great, thank you. Councillor Fane's hand has just gone up.
Thank you, Chair. I know officers will be well aware that Cambridge City Council is going through a similar review, and I'm sure we could learn something from each other. I think in relation to the very important points that Councillor Ellington made, it may be that some people from parts of South Cambs district are more likely to want to access Cambridge City, the Guildhall, than here. It might be the other way around, although I can't see that. But in any case, I think it would be well worth not quite combining forces on it, although we do that a fair amount, but at least exchanging ideas about it.
Thank you. Is there any other councillor who wished to make any comments in relation to this? Councillor Leeming and then Councillor Stobart.
Hi there. I was just thinking perhaps we need to start from a very concrete position of what space is free at the moment, and is this settled at the moment? Because we've reached this point through a change of circumstances and a change of working patterns, and I'm not completely sure whether things are fluid or stable now, and I would like to have some clarity that we're starting from a stable position and we know what is free.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart, I did see your hand, didn't I? Yes. Excellent. Councillor Stobart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I was just going to reflect, maybe reinforce some of the points made earlier that you know, office space is invaluable to go startup. We would think of kind of incubators, but incubators perhaps more for companies that are supported by venture capital and you know, are rich and thrusting. But there are social businesses, and there are maybe certified B enterprises that are just getting off the ground, for which some of the office accommodation here could be particularly valuable. Now, there's another dimension I was thinking about, which was this is going to be a very energy efficient building, isn't it, when the new building services are delivered, and that might be a big advantage compared with some of the more conventionally heated buildings in the vicinity. And so perhaps members for Camborne, you might have a view on, you know, are there businesses out there looking for startup premises? You might have a better picture. And are there many individuals in that category of, well, we want to run a social business, we want to run a certified B business, and it's difficult to find a spot, you know, to get started up.
Thank you very much. We have nobody else on the list councillor-wise at the moment for that. Okay, so I will turn to Liz, if there's anything you wish to say in relation to this item.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Funnily enough, I had a meeting about this at 1 o'clock today, so actually if I may hand on to Jeff Membry, who leads this area, he could maybe update you on where we are and then how you'd like to take things forward. Thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, actually, it's a very opportune time for you to be discussing this. It's actually quite gratifying to hear that the sort of themes that we as officers have been thinking about are exactly the themes that this committee has been reflecting in this meeting. It's exactly the case that things have changed an awful lot since we last had a space survey done. It was only 2 years ago. It was the beginning of 2020, which turned out to be just exactly the wrong time to have a space survey done, because things have changed quite dramatically since. So we've been going through the process of identifying exactly the sort of things that you've been talking about. What do we expect the demand to be from officers and members going forward into the future? What does that mean for the amount of office space that we're going to need to take up, and the type of office space that we provide, and then what opportunities does that give us in terms of having some space available for charities or startup businesses who would be looking for somewhere to be able to come occasionally at relatively low cost, and what does that give us in terms of space that we've got available to rent out, particularly as you've highlighted, in light of the fact that we've got a lot of advantages to this building now in terms of the green agenda and going forward the potential costs which will have been mitigating in terms of heating, lighting, etc. So in a few weeks' time, we'd be in a very strong position to bring some proposals to you to review, and I think that would be an exciting way to spend some of the committee's time. I'll certainly look forward to coming and talking to you about it, because it is, as you rightly say, this is one of our prime assets, and how we're going to use this going forward is a really important part of our planning for the future.
Is that we're clear on kind of what we think should happen, and then Jeff has kind of outlined where it is on that. So this one being, because it is a smaller thing in terms of its work, my general kind of pose on this is exactly there as Jeff said, when I say a report, I mean more of a sort of just statement of information. I don't mean a great big long report, you know, great appendices and whatever, almost kind of a thing of outlining. This is what we're doing, this is kind of where we are, these are the plans that we have. And then that we would talk about that in the meeting, as Jeff has talked about there, and then we would come back to it at some point, maybe in 12 months' time, and we would then review the progress that has been made and what has been done. And I think this is kind of a fairly simple one for us in terms of organising from there. I was about to say we have lost our visiting colleagues, but they have come back. This is excellent. Okay, so, and I'm just going to go through it again, although I'm, without making an assumption, I ask if all members are content for us to pursue plans for the efficient use of the space available at South Cambridgeshire District Council Hall up to 2026 as an item for scrutiny and overview consideration. Thank you very much, everyone. The third one on my list is actually about young people in South Cambridgeshire, but I can come to that last on the grounds that it ties in with the motion that went to full council and the idea of a task and finish group that we are then going to set up. So the last one that I put was engagement of the council with stakeholders across the district. And my thoughts in relation to this tie in with some of the things actually that have been mentioned. So I think of Councillor Ellington's point about the way in which there are different various charities that potentially may want to be engaged with the council in some ways, and the way in which people view the council, and the bit we talked about earlier in terms of the planning service and the way in which different stakeholders in terms of people who have planning issues or people who are working with the planning service and parish councils. But for me, the stakeholder groups are then a much wider thing. I think one of the things that as a council we should constantly be doing is considering the extent to which we are engaging with the full range of people who are residents within our district. And coming back to the point that was made earlier about the relatively small engagement with the planning service survey that was done with parish councils, for instance, and I know that we often talk about, as we did with different quarters data, getting more and more people to be involved. But I was also struck by a conversation, as obviously town councillor for Camborne, so the largest settlement in the district, it can seem quite easy at times for our town council to engage with the district council on the grounds that there are 19 of them. We were very lucky to even have a contested election with our gigantic ballot paper, which I know Liz and officers had a great bit of democratic entertainment producing and counting. But actually, it's a very large parish town council. It doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's kind of clear for that. However, there are plenty, for instance, of extremely small villages within our district who are not even large enough to have a parish council. So they will have a parish meeting, where it's once a year or such like, and I'm sure that there are members sat here who represent villages such as that. And I think it would be very interesting for us to consider how do those villages feel about their engagement with the district council as a whole. I also recall having a conversation, and I have to apologise, I can't remember which district council it was with, about the way in which they had worked on a project over a period of time with older residents living in sheltered housing within one of the villages, and how they had talked about the use of central spaces within that, and how this had been a project for getting those older residents to be able to engage with different officers of the council and different services, and whether it could be open, or whether it should be shut, or it should be closed down. And I think I'd be very interested to know how sometimes groups such as that, who can be more hard to reach at times, because of maybe less likely to access digital communications, which perhaps are a way in which we measure things more often at the moment, and the way in which people in that position feel. I am always struck by, we have a phrase in education that we refer to as the hard to reach. And what we mean by that is sometimes young people and families who it can be quite easy for schools to not engage with because there may be a difficult relationship, or there may be a lack of willingness to engage on the part of that young person or family. And one of the things that we do in education is we work incredibly hard to make sure we engage with those more hard to reach people. And one of the things I'd like to maybe investigate and know about here is the extent to which the council is engaging with groups who are maybe more traditionally excluded, who are less likely to come forward and engage. And I see this as another one, a bit like the first one that I put on the list, which perhaps relates to some case study examples again, talking to officers. I have absolutely no doubt that we have numerous examples of officers in the council who have had great success in engaging with small or large stakeholder groups who perhaps others have found more difficult, and that those officers could tell us about how they've succeeded. And I think allowing them to share their expertise, both with councillors but also with other officers in a way that may not always happen, would be a beneficial outcome of us looking at this. So I don't see this as every single stakeholder across the entire council, because I feel that would be an entire council's work for about 5 years and you would do absolutely nothing else. But I think that we may well consider where there are groups who maybe we think could do with having their engagement with the council investigated and how it may be able to be improved. And I would hope to get out of this a greater sense of, again, openness and engagement and communication between everyone, and making it very clear to people the value that we place on them as residents and as groups, and engaging. And I will just reference back to the fact that obviously we had Mr. Fulton here earlier at the start, and Mr. Fulton and his Fuse Lane group are often very challenging towards the council, and I know that the council works incredibly hard in engaging with those who can be quite challenging towards the council. And I think there are lots of things as a council that we can be very proud of and very positive about in terms of our engagement with groups. So therefore, I would refer to the words that Mr. Fulton used at the end of his statement in terms of these things can only benefit us all in terms of our engagement with each other. So those are my thoughts in relation to that one. I wonder if there are anything councillors wish to comment and add in that regard. We have Councillor Bradnam first of all.
Thank you. And I apologise that I was not here at the beginning of the meeting and thus didn't hear what Mr. Fulton said, but I shall happily listen back to the recording of this meeting to hear what he said. But one of the things that occurs to me is, well, sorry, there are two things that occur to me. One is, one of the groups I think we probably find it hardest to engage with as a district council is residents in private rented accommodation, because we have no natural route through to them. And often the mouthpiece that they might most readily encounter would be a village social media page, or indeed our own social media page if they were engaged with that, or indeed in parishes, certainly in my own parish, the fact that we actually deliver to every door a parish magazine, a printed parish magazine, in order, and that suits some demographic and some people, and some you choose Facebook and social media. So it's just thinking about how we can engage with the people who aren't in our, normal routes of communication. And the other one is being mindful that the county council may well have a route into those people, because the county council is responsible for adult care and children and education and social care. And so our way into those communities might be through our colleagues in the county council. It's just a thought. It's just thinking about these things.
Councillor Fane's hand.
Well, yes, I just wanted to follow up what Councillor Bradnam said. I know that the private rented sector was just intended as an example, but I think it's quite a good example because I find a number of people in that sector are not aware of the role of the district council in, for instance, if they have a problem with their landlord, in securing improvements to sustainability, insulation, energy efficiency and so on. They're not aware that the district council is actually responsible for enforcing those regulations. Forgive me, Chair, a matter which I was going to raise later in another context, having raised it previously at this committee. But I just use that as an example of the difficulty of getting people to engage if they don't realise our relevance. And it's quite difficult for us as councillors to anticipate what their concerns may be. We sort of wait for people to come to us, and these people will not do so. So I think it's a very valuable subject for discussion, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cone. Oh, I might turn myself off for a moment.
Yeah, just following on from that, really, I was going to talk about sort of harder to reach groups, possibly sort of like care homes and things like that, where people are, either very elderly, disabled, and find it difficult to get both sort of print and information through social media or IT systems. and you know, just that it's interesting. There's obviously lots of sort of young people's and toddler groups and baby groups and things like that, where we could maybe sort of reach out for, you know, some of the things that the council is doing for those groups, you know, in environments that they sort of feel comfortable in, whether that's, you know, attending a coffee morning at a care home, or attending a baby group, or whatever it might be, really. So it's just sort of the reaching out element of that, really.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Is there any other councillor who wish to add anything in relation to this at this point? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just aware that the most recent edition of the district magazine has appeared, and one of the issues that's been brought to our attention sometimes is it doesn't necessarily go to every household, and I've certainly logged households it hasn't gone to. I don't know what happens with that information, so I'm wondering if because that's a tool that is already there that can be used to communicate with people. Have we got any feedback on how many people report not receiving? I know I've got the message and put that people can access it electronically, but obviously not everybody's going to do that. So I'm just wondering how that facility could be used if we wanted to get feedback from residents, but we need to know how many residents aren't actually getting it, if that makes sense.
Okay. I don't have any other councillors hand up or on my list at the moment in relation to this topic. So, Liz, I'll come to you. Anything to add, comment in relation to this one?
Actually, I'm going to go straight to...
Yes, of course. I'm coming to you first and then leaving it to you.
Could I direct you in Anne Ainsworth direction, please?
Anne.
Thank you, Chair. I think with this particular example, there's a couple of things that would be incredibly useful to do. One of them, I think, might be a scoping report, so that we can hone down on particular examples of where we have engaged with people, either hard to reach groups, or, as you say, smaller villages, smaller community groups that might not be the usual people that we might think that we're engaging with. I think that would be a very useful thing to do. And the other aspect would be a scoping report, so that we can identify clearly what outcomes we'd be looking for from this, what type of learning we would want to take away, and how we would engage with people. Your point about hard to reach groups, that's something that I and colleagues I know have worked on before, in terms of reaching out and engaging with people who we might not otherwise reach through traditional communications. So if committee would be in agreement, we could put together a scoping report, I think, to bring back to you. The other thing that would be really useful is obviously engaging with individuals and local communities. Members are so important in this space, and often the key part of the information that we receive about how we can further engage with people, what concerns they might have, and indeed whether we can target people in the nicest possible way to engage with them better and to involve them in services or aspects of what the council's doing. So I think it'd be really useful through this piece of work as well to look at the member engagement, as well as what officers may have done previously and how we could improve.
Great, thank you very much, Anne. Any more councillors wish to add? I think Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. It occurs to me that I'm sure in the past at some committee we have seen reports from the tenant participation group, as it was called in the past. I'm sure Mr. Campbell, Peter Campbell, will put me right if I've got the name wrong. But I just wondered, are we still having reports from the tenants to this committee periodically?
Peter, I assume you're best placed to answer that one.
Well, there's not been any recently, but we have just recently had the results from a tenant survey which went to all tenants, and the results of that will be coming back. But that also, there's quite a lot of information in that about which sections of the community responded, which will also help to inform the work that Anne mentioned. So yes, we have got a report that's due to you, and that should be with you within the next month or two.
We're
committee, so that's great.
Fantastic. Councillor Hobo, did I just see your hand waving? I did. Sorry, and it's Councillor Earl first and then Councillor Hobo. Sorry, I'd missed you on the list, Louis.
Yes, I felt that perhaps you could make better use of some of the organisations in various villages and towns where there may be people who are not naturally users of South Cambs, but who are educated, outgoing, willing to work with the community and who can become resources if only they knew more about what's actually available. Because at the moment I think there is a certain level of ignorance because people don't use the services, they've got other priorities, but we could actually tap into that and make some resource available so people know what we do, what the County Council does, etc.
Great, thank you very much. And Councillor Hobo.
So I really simply wanted to second Anne Ainsworth's comments about the role of us as ward members in active communication in a way that is peculiar to our wards. And so we're really the only people who can understand what the local social media groups are, what the local magazines are. It's impractical to expect anyone at a higher level within the district council to be able to keep track of all of that. And so I think we perhaps need to make sure, understand that we have a duty of communication and active communication in these areas that are peculiar to our wards.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, yes, Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly then, Councillor Earl raised a point which actually resonated because we've been being asked in Girton Ward by members of the Parish Council, how do we form a link between, there's the Parish Council looking at the village, perceiving needs, understanding, and here are we as district councillors, there's just two of us, and it's a big village. So actually the role of the Parish Council is very significant, and it touches on some of the issues we spoke about in the first topic. So there's something to think about is the Parish Council, which is often populated by the kind of people, Councillor Earl, that are, through Chair, that are attentive and connected and interested. That's why I'm on the Parish Council. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Just going to scan the room. Nobody else is adding. Okay, thank you very much. So, in relation to that then, the engagement of the council with stakeholders across the district. We obviously had the conversation there where Anna's pointed about an initial scoping report, because again, this is another one that has potential to be very large, and what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are focused in what we are doing, and we don't run the risk, as I kind of half-jokingly said, of trying to do every single stakeholder and spending the next 5 years doing nothing but this. And obviously we will be successful in this if we are able to identify where we're going to go with it, what kind of groups and things we're going to look at. Some, as ever, really kind of helpful points in terms of where we can go, which I know Ian would have written down, and we can review the meeting recording later on at that point. So what I propose in that regard is that Graham, myself and Ian will then talk further with Anne regarding the scoping report suggestion. That will then come back to committee at some point when we have the space to do that, and then we will pursue that as a job of work going forward, which again we will communicate with committee about. So if I can just ask if for an affirmation that we are happy for engagement of the council with stakeholders across the district to be a topic of consideration for scrutiny and overview. Excellent, great, thank you very much everyone. So the next actual item on the agenda is in relation to the issue of youth engagement with youth engagement in South Cambridgeshire, which, as I say, comes out of the motion that was put by Councillor Heather Williams to the full council in July. Goodness me, I had to think for a moment there, obviously forgetting August even existed, which was definitely supported unanimously, and I know a number of councillors spoke very positively about that. And I had happened actually, when I had submitted these on the same day, to put young people in South Cambridgeshire, so I was pleased to see that minds were thinking alike. And that has then, in Councillor Williams' motion, she talked about it going in the first instance to Cabinet, and again that was agreed. So that has been to Cabinet, which was then agreed following conversation between myself as Chair of Scrutiny Overview, Councillor Cone and Councillor Williams and Councillor Smith, that it would then come back to this committee for, as we talked about in terms of task and finish group and for further development in that regard. So this is then slightly different to what we've talked about to the first three in terms of topics of the committee, because this is a sort of like bigger project, and this is one where my expectation would be that we will set up a group of 5 councillors who will lead on this project, will do the work in relation to this, and that they will then come up with their plan of work and how they are going to work on that. And I see this as being something which will have a significant amount of investigation and communication involved with different young people's groups and those who are serving young people already, and what the council is doing, but also how we can increase the engagement of young people with the council, both from a democratic perspective, but also from a service perspective, and how we can support young people in that regard. This is something where I would expect us to possibly be going down the route of hearings and investigations and possibly spending periods of time with young people, wherever that may be across the district. And I would reference again the point about not just focusing on what I would say are big towns. We're not yet maybe in that situation of saying big towns, perhaps that comes some point down the road, but definitely our towns and our villages, and also our smaller villages as well. Because I know that one of the things that I think is important for us to consider is that we do have that range of large settlements and very small settlements. And I think one of the things, especially those of us who maybe grew up in smaller villages, would always think is that we're always cut off from it. And we're always that step further away. However, I also know, having spoken to young people who live in very, very big cities, that they also feel the same at times, even though they may well be living in the centre of the big city that others aspires to be. So therefore, what in the first instance we need to do is we need to agree the membership of that group. So as I explained in an email that I sent out to people, I'm happy to be involved in that group and potentially lead that group if that is what a committee is happy for me to do. I've also received an offer from Councillor Stobart. I believe you offered to be part of this. Good, excellent. I was having one of those little moments where you look at somebody and you're absolutely convinced in your mind that they are the person. And you nodded at me, which was great. Otherwise, I was going to look around and think, oh, who else said me? So Councillor Stobart has offered to be part of that. I haven't at this moment received offers from others. I don't know if there's anyone else who would like to offer to be part of that. Councillor Eddington.
I have experience of doing this in the past and know some of the pitfalls of said, but would not want to restrict the thinking of the committee in doing it the way I did it, if you see what I mean. So I'm very happy to be part of that committee, but I might keep quiet some of the time, which will be a change, won't it, folks?
I feel it would be inappropriate for me to comment at this point, Councillor Ellington. Councillor Bradnam.
I, in my county role, chair the Corporate Parenting Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Children and Young People Committee at the council. And I won't bore you with the details of that, but suffice it to say that we interleave informal meetings with our formal in-public meetings. And I am working towards a situation where our informal meetings actually the young people from the Children in Care Council, so these are elected from within the children in our care. These are the children in care in the county. And they elect from amongst themselves children to sit on the Children in Care Council, and they in turn convey to us, through this informal meeting, the things that they would like us to consider. And so I'm working very hard to actually get them to be participants in the agenda setting for that meeting, but to also guide us as to how they would like that meeting to happen, literally, not necessarily with laptops open and all around a room and with tables amongst us. It might just be sitting around chairs in a room discussing with somebody else minuting it in the background. But so getting the young people engaged in, and they're very keen to be an active part of that. So it's allowing young people to engage in a way that they want to, I think is really important. And you can appreciate with the cumbersome structures of county council, and that's not in a rude way, it's just, it has to be like that because of policy setting, but trying to break that down in this informal meeting so that the young people can take part in a way that they want to, is a task, and we're working with it. So I think if you want me to feed in, I'm very welcome to, but I don't think I've got time to.
That's fine, Councillor Betham. There's no problem at all. It sounds like you would be a very good person to be involved. I'm just going to pause a moment and say the noise that we can hear is rain. And I just wish to have a moment to pause of, goodness me, we might have forgotten what that noise sounded like after many, many months. Oh, it's a very nice sound. Councillor Fain, I believe your hand was up next.
Well, Chairman, you'll be glad to know I wasn't going to put myself forward as one of the 5 members. I think there is a danger that we might have a lot of extensive experience and expertise available, and maybe less identity with some of those target groups. I'm conscious of the fact that I'm trying to be tactful, it doesn't come easy to me. I'm conscious of the fact that this is following on to some extent from a motion put forward by the opposition, and that our Vice Chair maybe was going to speak on this, so forgive me if I've jumped in, but I think it's very important that we should have some of our younger members of this council involved in this work, which is one of the reasons I'm not putting myself forward.
Okay, excellent. Councillor Cone.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd like to sit on the committee, and not just because I'm younger, but just, yeah, I think it's very important, and I think there's lots of different groups that we can engage with, from you know, schools, youth clubs, scouts, and even actually sort of younger than that we talked about before, like baby groups, toddlers, and primary schools that I know are already doing like democracy days and things like that. So, yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, excellent. And Councillor Leaming.
I would like to volunteer.
Okay, I am just going to share that Councillor Leaming, I have something of an ongoing joke regarding that she is, relatively speaking, a younger councillor. And I'm just going to confess that I may have inadvertently suggested she wasn't during a meeting. So I'm going to have a little public mea culpa. You are most definitely one of the younger councillors, Councillor Leaming. Excellent, okay. So I think we are kind of there in terms of those 5. And I think we have a good range of people there. So what we will do then is pursue to sort of set up a first meeting of the people who said that they're going to be involved, and that we will then come up with a plan of work and action for that, taking into account what's been said and looking for those things from there. So that's very good. Yes, Councillor Leaming again.
I'd like to ask a question. What is the threshold for a young person? Are we talking about people under 25? Are we speaking about people under 30? Are we speaking about children? I think we should be clear about that before we set off, because when we've spoken earlier about underrepresented groups, I would perhaps say that under 30s would fall in that category, and it depends on what we're doing this for.
That's most definitely something to discuss. So I'm about to go to Liz, simply because I don't see anyone else waving at me, so I'm going to go to Liz.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the kind of got a good, good steer here in what was the purpose of this piece of work. The only thing I would suggest is that you could, there's been some reference here to the age of some of the members of the group. If you were so minded, you could co-opt a young person onto the group. And I know we had some fantastic work experience students working with us who were kind of year 12 during the summer. I can think at least of one of those who, would be brilliant in kind of being a constant in the group, because I know you will want to talk to lots of young people. But if you wanted to co-opt somebody, that's obviously within your gift, and I know you'll have lots of contacts through your own work, Councillor.
Thank you. I don't know if any of the other 4 officers have anything to add in relation to this. We have the vigorous head shaking once again. Okay, that's absolutely fine, no problem at all. So just before I move on from that, I'm just going to check that no other councillor wishes to add anything after we've had that conversation at this stage. Councillor Ellington.
I'm just wondering where the officer who will manage this group will be able to come from. Is that a community function, or is it a democratic services function? Just thinking of it must be quite an onerous task to manage this particular group. And obviously management will decide those things, but identifying somebody who knows South Cambs well enough to know the various groups that there are and where they are. And personnel might be quite difficult to identify.
Is there anything you want to talk to that now? Because I mean, I would assume that we'd kind of have that discussion and go through later on, but I'm happy for you to say something now.
Well, I think you need to give us a steer when you have your first meeting about where you want to go. Obviously, we've got lots of expertise in the communities team. You may need support from democratic services. So, you know, I think you need to come and tell us what you need.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, on that note, we will call through. I'm not going to call for affirmation in relation to that because that's obviously to do with a motion to council that has already been unanimously agreed and has followed through the procedure to go to Cabinet and has then been agreed that it would come back to us for us to work on that. So thank you for all those comments in relation to that. I am going to always do what I do at this point. Actually, no, I have thought of what the other item is I need to talk about. I do apologise. I was going to do my usual thing of checking with Ian because I thought I'd forgotten, but I have remembered something else. This one, in relation to this and the work that we do, one of the other things that we talked about and agreed was that we would also use Scrutiny Overview to interview and talk to what I refer to as outside agencies who provide services related to South Cambridgeshire residents. So what I would like to do at this point is to ask if there is any organisation that anyone would like to identify as providing services to South Cambridgeshire residents, which can be in the public sector or possibly even the private sector, and I'm thinking there in terms of the provision of buses, for instance, that anyone on the committee would like to suggest might be something that we might consider looking into, interviewing, talking to, reporting on, or whatever. This is a fairly open kind of call for idea at this stage, and then obviously that is something we will continue to work through, but I wanted to ask if there was a thing. At the moment I have Councillor Cohn, who has written his own name down.
The only one that I had was, I suppose, a private company. I'm not sure if it's completely appropriate for us to look at it or not, but it's the Lifeline company that feeds into our elderly people's properties and so forth. Because I know it's something that residents have brought up in terms of how that works and the efficiency of that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Councillor Fane. And then Councillor van der Veer.
Yes, it occurs to me that one group that provides very useful services in a number of villages is Romsey Mill, who run, for instance, our youth services and engage in a number of other ways, running volunteer cafes and so on. And I think we would find it extremely useful to speak to groups. That may be just one of many examples others would know.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor van der Veer.
Yeah, back when we had two scrutiny committees, one of which was called the Partnerships Committee, I believe. We often had people coming in, and it was often useful. Although it was, I mean, had a discussion with the person, there wasn't much sort of follow-up. So these issues that we've been talking about how scrutiny works. But obviously, one of the major issues that we all face at the moment is the provision of health services. So some engagement with the CCG or whatever it's now called might be useful. A particular issue that's come up in some discussions I've been involved in recently is to do with the decentralisation of health services and getting health services into communities. That could be a particular theme that we could discuss with CCGs and other relevant health organisations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bradnam.
Yes, I was thinking, just thinking about what Councillor van der Veer has just said. Of course, health, it's the integrated care service which is delivered as it's a function that's overseen at county level, but obviously they certainly in terms of getting health provision in new developments is quite important. Mm-hmm. I was actually thinking about care wardens. I know the district council sponsors and employs a number of care wardens. In my own parish, we employ our own care warden with the help of Milton Charities and support from South Cambs District Council. And that role is really quite important in enabling elderly people to remain independent in their own homes but with the support of somebody. It's not providing care or at all personal care. It's simply enabling them to be confident and their family to know that these are people who are continuing to be independent safely. So this is often where family are not close enough by to be dropping in regularly, whereas the care warden can keep in touch regularly. And the resident obviously pays a small fee towards that, which, I mean, one of those, I mean, certainly our own is absolutely brilliant. I highly recommend her coming to speak about what the sorts of things that they can do to support communities.
Fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Leaming.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to speak to Cambridge Water and possibly Anglian Water. I don't know whether we would invite them both together or perhaps just Cambridge Water, but I would like to talk to them about supply, water quality monitoring, the preservation of our chalk streams, managing the extraction from the aquifer, and wastewater management, partly because this is an issue that I know a lot of residents are concerned about, but also because it has a strategic input into our planning decisions.
Okay, great, thank you very much. I don't have anyone else's hand up at this stage, so you can just write Drew down there for a moment. So I would very much like us to consider the issue of transport and the provision there by stagecoach. And I think that is something that comes up very regularly from residents, is linked to transport issues, and there are so many transport things that as a district council we are involved in, and I would like to look into that. I would hope that any of these private companies would put themselves forward for engagement with a scrutiny committee of a local authority, and I am sure that they would see it as a positive activity on their part to be engaging with residents' representatives. So I would add stagecoach to my list. Is there anyone else who wishes to raise hand at this point? No? Okay. Liz, I will come over to you as always at our almost end of meeting time.
No, I don't have any comments, thanks. Obviously, this is in your gift. And in my experience, so I do have one comment. My experience in the past, this has either worked very well or very badly when you invite people in. And I think it works badly when, as a committee, you're not prepared and briefed, and you don't know what you're trying to get out of the invitation. So it probably needs some careful thought in terms of what's the purpose of bringing a third partner in, a third party in, and what do you want to get out of it. But it can work brilliantly.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. So I don't see any other hands or anything else in relation to that. So I am now going to do my little bit moment, which I always want to do, because I always don't want to come to the end of the meeting and find that I've completely left something out. Ian has confirmed that to me. I must confess that every meeting I chair, wherever it is, I'd always live in fear of getting to the end of the meeting and somebody pointing out to me that I've completely forgotten something rather significant because I've missed it on the agenda. It's like one of my life fears, I think. Okay, so that then brings us towards the end of the meeting. If I can just raise one thing, and I'm hoping here to see a hand go up from a willing volunteer. All I'm going to say is, Scrutiny Overview Committee members, this is an exciting opportunity for you, and I would like you to see it in that way. A report from this meeting will be presented to Cabinet on the 12th of September 2022. Neither the Vice Chair nor I will be able to attend the meeting, so would any other committee member be prepared to act as spokesperson for the committee on the morning of the 12th of September, because neither the Chair nor the Vice Chair are able to attend due to work commitments. Oh, we have a hand from Councillor Bradnam. Thank you very much. Oh. Excellent. So, unless anyone else would like to wrestle Councillor Bradnam for this responsibility. This is excellent. Both Councillor Cohn and I would very much love to be able to do it, but obviously, as everyone is aware, with full-time jobs, it is not something that fits with what we're able to do, but obviously that is where we look to be able to involve other members of the committee in fulfilling those responsibilities that everything is done. Councillor Bradnam, thank you very much. Your offer is kindly accepted by the two of us. Yes, a nod from both of us. Thank you very much. So therefore, at that moment, I believe we have concluded all the business for the meeting. And as I said, I hoped at the start we would manage 90 minutes. We have managed 85 minutes and we are at the end. So those of you who have parish council meetings and other acts of further councillor work to attend will hopefully be able to go off and attend and meet with your parishes. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your attendance at the meeting, both councillors and officers. Thank you.